I know it's been a long wait at this point, but today I'm really excited to finally get to show you guys version 3 of the mintyPi. So if you're new to the channel, the idea behind the mintyPi is to fit a Raspberry Pi based gaming handheld running RetroPie inside of an Altoids mint tin. And before I get to all the new stuff, let me first show you just how far this project has come in the last couple of years. This is the first version I did a couple of years ago, and it was actually the first Raspberry Pi project that I ever did. And as you can see, it's pretty rough. I didn't have a 3D printer yet, so the bottom portion is hacked together out of a broken DS Lite, a piece of acrylic, and some off-the-shelf parts. But hey, it still works today. Fast forward a year, and I'd gotten into 3D printing and modeling, but the internals are still pretty rough, using a 3D printed board and some copper tape for the button PCB. Then Handheld got involved and brought some custom PCBs and a bigger screen into the mix, and that along with some other off-the-shelf parts made it a much more accessible project that most people could put together. And then we did one more iteration on that to integrate things like a battery monitor, function button for doing things like shutting down safely, and adjusting volume. Which brings us to version 3, and this is by far the biggest jump between versions yet. So let me just go through all the new features and improvements. We've got a 2.6-inch screen up from 2.4 inches. It's an IPS and landscape orientation screen, so the viewing angles are much better and it's quite a bit brighter too. The next big change is the buttons we're using. You may have seen these in a previous video. They're actually custom-made injection molded silicone, similar to what you'd find on a remote control for your TV. They're nice and responsive and smooth in their travel. They just feel worlds better to use. Also gives us some fun color options as well. The 3D printed parts have been totally redesigned. There's a power button, so the switch is gone. You don't have to make a hole for that in the tin. There's a function button next to it, which is integrated into the design now, so you don't have to worry about adding that yourself, like in the previous version. You can hold it down to adjust things like volume, toggle the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and that kind of thing. And side note, we're using a version of Bloop's scripts that he wrote for the Pocket Pi FE that I've modified to work for this. So big thanks to him for letting us use that. We're still tweaking the software, so that's why it says Pocket FE up there at the top, but we'll have that finished up here soon. Then there's this new button up here by the bezel. This is supposed to be a quick action button for doing something you'd normally have to remember a button combination within RetroArch to do. Right now I have it set up so that if you press it, it will save state in whatever game you're running. Then if you hold down the function button and press it, it will load state. Super handy for a portable like this, where you might be playing an older game that wasn't necessarily designed for shorter gaming sessions. I'm planning on adding a couple other options that you can choose between for what this button does, so if you've got suggestions for that, let me know in the comments below and I'll see if I can make it happen. And as you've probably noticed, multicolor parts are an option now as well, thanks to this box right here. This is called the Palette 2 from Mosaic Manufacturing, and it splices together different colors of filament while you're printing, so you can print in up to 4 colors at once. Really cool machine. I've actually tried a few different methods of printing with multiple colors and materials, and I thought about doing a video on that, so if that's something you guys would be interested in, let me know. I've also redesigned part of the hinge mechanism so that you can sort of lock it in place if you open it far enough, so it won't flop down on you if you hold it up. As we go around the side here, you'll notice a couple extra holes on the front of the tin. The biggest new addition is a headphone jack. This is optional, so if you don't want it, you don't have to add it, but a lot of people asked for it, so there it is. To the left of that, there's now another optional cutout that you can add for the USB port on the Pi. You can attach a keyboard or a thumb drive or whatever you could normally attach to a Raspberry Pi Zero, but again, this is optional, so if you don't care about it, you don't have to add it. Then on the left-hand side, we've got the charging port, which is now USB Type-C, since that's the direction everyone's moving in, and this tiny hole next to it is a charging indicator that'll change colors depending on the charging status. Then on the back, we've got L and R buttons, just like every previous version of the mintyPi. I still get people asking if it has L and R buttons. But instead of the clicky tactile switches that we used in previous versions, now we're using soft silicone buttons similar to what's on the front of it. So that's it for the outside, but let me show you the parts that go on the inside, where there are some even bigger changes and improvements. First of all, everything is included in these two boards, meaning that you don't have to go hunting down a battery charging board, USB sound card, all that stuff like in previous versions. It's all integrated. And there are no wires to solder. Like, at all. Attaching the Pi to this board and a couple other bits for the headphone jack and the L&R board are the only soldering that you have to do on this. So it's much quicker and easier to put together, not to mention easier to fit everything inside the tin. It's got I2S sound integrated, which is digital and sounds just as good as a USB sound card in previous versions. Really popular chip used in some Adafruit boards, the Pocket Pi FE, and others. Over here is a boost circuit, which takes whatever voltage the battery is currently providing and boosts it up to 5 volts. This has a couple of really nice advantages. For one thing, now we have 5 volts going to the USB port on the front. The previous version was only supplying 3.3 volts to that USB port, so it could be kind of hit and miss for what would work and what wouldn't. The other big advantage is that this is able to boost anything all the way down to about 3.2 volts up to 5 volts. That means that we're able to discharge the battery quite a bit further than we were before things like the screen start cutting out. But don't worry, we've got it automatically shutting off at a safe limit, so it's not trying to over discharge the battery or anything like that. On the top side of the board, there's this new little component here. This is a Hall effect sensor, which is used for detecting the presence of magnets. It's commonly used in laptops and things like that, along with a magnet for detecting when you close the lid. You can probably see where I'm going with this. There's now a magnet next to the screen in the bezel, and I've got it set up so that if you shut the lid, it will safely turn the system off automatically. Not only that, but if you're running a game, it'll automatically save state before shutting down, so you'll be able to pick up right where you left off the next time that you turn it on. Then we've got a custom battery made just for the mintyPi. This is 2200 milliamp hours, up from 1200 in the previous version, quite a bit larger capacity. It's still running the Raspberry Pi Zero, running the ever popular RetroPi, so if you're familiar with projects like this, then you probably know about what to expect as far as performance. But if you're wondering what kinds of games you can play on this, just go right here on YouTube and type in Raspberry Pi Zero emulation, and you'll get a ton of results of people benchmarking various systems and games. But generally speaking, anything from about the Super NES back should run pretty well with a few exceptions. Even Game Boy Advance games run pretty well on it. So Handheld and I are opening up pre-orders for these today. Just like previous versions, this is a do-it-yourself electronics project, meaning that you gather all the parts together and assemble it yourself. For a lot of people, including myself, that's half the fun with these kinds of projects. I'm offering everything that you need for the case, meaning the 3D printed parts, the buttons, the screws, magnets, all that stuff. And then Handheld's offering all the electronics components, including the speaker and the battery. And he's partnering with somebody in Europe to offer the battery outside of the US, so you should be able to get taken care of no matter where you are. So check the link in the description for where you can pre-order. And again, these are pre-orders, so they probably won't be shipping out for about 3 or 4 weeks. Handheld has to order large quantities of all the components and get them assembled, and then I'll start cranking out these 3D printed parts as fast as I can. All that takes time, as you can imagine. This one that I'm holding here was done with the last set of prototype parts that we ordered. So in a few weeks before everything starts shipping out, I'll have another video up showing you how to put it together. It'll be pretty short because it's quite a bit easier than previous versions, but I'll still give you some tips for drilling out the tin, attaching the Pi to the board, and everything like that. At that point, I'll also share the STL files for the 3D printed parts, so if you have a printer, you'll be able to make them yourself if you want to. I've also got a couple smaller projects coming up, so there may be a video or two between this one and the build video for version 3 of the mintyPi. Alright guys, well I think that about covers it. I hope it was worth the wait. I'm really happy with how it turned out. Huge thanks to Handheld for all his great work on this. This project has just been a blast to work on. Also, thanks again to Bloop for letting us use the scripts that he wrote for the Pocket Pi FE in this version of the mintyPi. Very cool of him to let us do that. Anyway, thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you next time.